Hi everyone and welcome to Rose Red Homestead, where today we are going to continue working through our 27 pages of your questions. And I'm going to try to be a little bit faster this time so we can get more progress done. Donna Moore asks, can I can ham hocks with the juice they are cooked in dry pintos that have been prepared for canning as per USDA? And the answer on that one, Donna, I'm sorry, is no, you can't. Cured meats are on the USDA no-no list. So best to do that afterward. Anna Hoggart asks, she says, my first canning attempt was your sirloin mushroom gravy. My rookie mistake was not getting the bubbles out. All the jars sealed, but I do see some fine bubbles at the top. Should I throw it out? Oh my goodness, Anna, don't be so hard on yourself. You did just fine. We get as much air out as we can. Do we get all of the air out? Sometimes no. If there's a little bit of air in, a little bit of air bubbles, that's just fine. Now, if those air bubbles continue to multiply, that's a sign that there is bacterial activity in. If it's just air that has come up from the food, that's fine. So just watch it. If those air bubbles increase, that's a danger sign. Otherwise, you're just fine. Bear says that she wants to can her own stuffed bell pepper soup. I just would like to recommend anyone who wants to do your own soup, go to USDA canning soup, and it will come up. The USDA regulations for, or the USDA tested recipes and processes for canning your own recipe are what you should follow there. One of the things, Bear, that you have put in yours is riced cauliflower, and I do know that cauliflower is on the do not can list. Debbie Carlton says, I saw a YouTuber say never to use oxygen absorbers with flour, as this causes botulism. Is this correct? Oh, for Pete's sake. Honestly, the things that you see on the internet sometimes just drive me nuts. That was said by a person who does not understand how botulism works. Flour is a dry product. So long as there is no moisture in your flour, then you're just fine. I use oxygen absorbers in our flour all the time when we can loose flour. When we store loose flour in 5-gallon buckets. I put oxygen absorbers in and just leave it. It's just fine. So no moisture there, no botulism. Answering God's Call says this, can we powder fresh eggs and how long is the shelf life? Okay, I pulled out one of my Augustin Farms dried whole egg powder. This is very similar to my own. In fact, I'll show you my own. This is my own dried egg powder. You might see the tip of an oxygen absorber there, and this is also vacuum sealed. This is oxygen absorber inside, plus it's vacuum sealed. My own eggs are the only food that I do both to. Everything else I just do one or the other. Now on the back of this label it says, shelf life, product good for up to 10 years when unopened. Well, how do I feel about keeping mine for 10 years unopened? Eggs are one thing that I will be watching very closely, and I do not intend to keep mine on the shelf for 10 years. We go through these constantly, and I have about 2 or 3 in reserve at all times. And so this is about 6 dozen eggs, Jim? 1 dryer worth? I can't remember for sure. But it was a ton of eggs.
Yeah, it's about 6 dozen.
And so we have 2 or 3 in reserve, and when I finish one, then I do another batch. And so I rotate through them. Keith Jensen says that he used a Tattler ring with a used lid to vacuum seal some dehydrated tomato powder. Woohoo! And they are holding, so that's kind of exactly what we have done too. And so go for it. I love it when people experiment and are successful with those experiments. And I was just up on the Tattler site checking out a couple of things. And they no longer sell the rings by themselves, and I wonder whose fault that is. That would be my fault, because of the stir that I caused by starting this experiment with the Tattler rings. They are also announcing that they are soon going to be putting out a brand new metal lid, and that metal lid is going to be reusable. I'm really curious to see how that is going to work, and I have my own predictions about how that is going to be. But you know, if any of the things that we did precipitated advancements for the Tattler company, I'm nothing but happy about that. Onat Laster asks, when I cannot get to the point where the pressure regulator weight will take breaks. So I understand this to mean that the jiggler just goes like this all the time. It's perfectly fine if it does that. It means that it is regulating the pressure inside. When it stops, that means it's building up pressure again. And then when that pressure gets to that right point, whether it's 10 pounds or 15 psi, then it's releasing a little bit of the pressure to hold it at that point. So what that means is that your canner is working beautifully and it's holding the pressure. So V. Sabi asks, would you please tell us what size the square buckets are that you use to store the 5-pound bags of King Arthur flour? Those Jim checked, and they are 4-gallon buckets, and I love those buckets. And this is from Erbo, who says, when I have fresh food in front of me, how best do I decide which method of preserving? Do I can it or do I dehydrate it? Are there some foods that should not be dehydrated? The answer to that question is yes. No meat except for jerky, no dairy, that means cheese, milk, that type of thing. Anything that is on the do not can list pretty much is the same for do not dehydrate. And it is because of the potential for the growth of bacteria. And I just wouldn't do it. It's such a great question that you ask about how do you know which way to do it. A lot of times you have 2 choices. If you have a freeze dryer, you have 3 choices. And so a lot of it just depends on trial and error, what you like, what your preference is. Freeze drying preserves the most food value. Next to that is dehydrating, and next to that is canning. And I do all 3. And so it just depends. The foods that I just mentioned that cannot be dehydrated can be freeze dried. And so that is one advantage of having a freeze dryer. Catherine Pickering says, if you vacuum seal rice in a food saver bag without an oxygen absorber, how long do you estimate it would last? I can't answer that because I can't answer it accurately for you, for anyone. And we get asked this question a lot. The thing to do is just rotate through your things. It depends on your storage conditions. In perfect storage conditions, if you seal in a food saver bag without an oxygen absorber, you've pulled all the air out. That's a really good thing. Then if you store that bag in something that won't let light in, like a bin of some kind, then you'll have a shelf life of several years. Renier Mayer, who is, I believe, from Europe, because the question is about liters and half liters and how much food is packed in each one, and how do you know what size of a jar to can what type of food in. Because you know what the volume is, a liter holds about 4 cups, a half liter is about the same as a pint, it holds 2 cups. What serving sizes do your family enjoy? For Jim and me, we do our food exclusively in pints and in quarts, and I know just exactly how much to open for the 2 of us because I know how much Jim eats, I know how much I eat. This question from Malcolm is really a good one. He says, I have a question about the possibility of over-venting your pressure canner. Is it possible? What happens if you vent for more than 10 minutes? Your pressure canner has a certain amount of water in the bottom of it. That water is used to generate the steam which propels the temperature upward. So it takes a certain amount of water in the canner at all times. If you overvent, if you forget, and walk away and you come back in a half an hour and your canner is just steaming like crazy, shut that down and put more water in it, because it has decreased the amount of water to make all of that steam, which has been shooting out. The danger is that if you overvent, and a minute or two is not going to make that much difference. I'm talking 20 minutes, half an hour longer than the 10 minutes. Then you should refill the water and start over on your process, because you don't want your canner to run out of water. So that was a great question. Daniel Strand says, what do you use for the window on the box and foil oven that you made? So here is the little box oven that he is talking about, and it has a little window. Now, I have since made some improvements. It now has this little door that I can latch closed to help with the insulation. But his question is, what did I use for this? Because it needs to be heat resistant. This is a double layer of a turkey cooking bag, and that's all there is to it. Barbara B. in Florida asks, are you able to recan bottled lemon juice and then use it in your water bath canning? You bet. Go for it. Janine Evans says, could you tell us where you got the shelves in the video with your canning? And do they come with bars in the front to keep the food secure? We got them at Costco. They're very, very sturdy. They do not come with bars. We have that little orange fencing that we've put around. Some people call that snow fencing. Other people call it barricade fencing, and we get it at Costco. Jeff Riffle says, why don't you take a day off? Jeff, I don't understand that question. I know, I need a day off. Actually, I have taken a vacation day from work today so that I could get a few other things done. And it really seems like, if I don't have to work and do YouTube stuff on the same day, it's a vacation. So that's where we are now. Nora Charles, bless Nora's heart. They bought a whole bunch of nuts, 25 pounds of pecans, walnuts, and almonds, and they vacuum sealed them. She's not well, and so she had assumed that her husband was going to put those vacuum sealed bags of nuts right in the freezer. And 5 days later, she discovered that they had not been put in the freezer, and she is really frightened about the possibility of botulism. Nora, nothing to worry about. You are doing exactly the right thing by storing nuts in the freezer. That's the best place to store nuts. That's where we store our nuts for long term, and it's not long term because they don't last long term, but the freezer is the very best place. You vacuum seal them, they are perfectly fine. So just put them right in the freezer and you are good to go. Brenda Connor wants to know if you can use monk fruit sweetener in place of sugar for canning options, and the answer is yes, you can. You probably will have to do a little experimenting on the amounts, but it does work. HKL Breeze asks, may I safely reuse plastic containers in which our refrigerated salad dressing arrives? Yes, you can. That will work just fine. And then she has a second question. Will you please consider future videos on sanitizing kitchen sponges, dish towels, kitchen traps, etc.? So I have added that to our list. We have done quite a bit on sanitation, but not that exact thing. With pool shock, Sheba has asked, I'm going to leave it in the bag until I know what to do with it. So Sheba, this is how I store mine. It's just in a plastic gallon jug with a plastic lid. And I leave it in the container. Don't empty it out of the container. Don't store the powder separately. Keep it in this container. Now, I could probably put 2 more in here as well. And then, of course, I have it labeled for what it is so that anybody who picks up this jar won't mistake it for something else. That was a great question, and I'm so glad you are going on that. Paula Darlene asks, I've seen other canners where they don't soak the beans, dry beans, and then can I just rinse the beans and can them? Is that safe? I know a lot of people do that. I don't anymore, which means, yes, I used to do that, but I don't anymore. 2 reasons. First, I follow USDA to a T on canning beans. Second, when I used to do that, one of the things that I found was that when I just put dry beans in the bottom of a jar and then add boiling water and process them, and I did this years ago, I haven't done it recently, those beans were not as tender as the ones that I pressure can. So, Cat Corona says, what does it mean when my jars come out of the can are boiling and one jar may not be boiling but it seals, the others are all boiling? Nothing to worry about, absolutely nothing to worry about. As long as they seal when they come out of the canner, you're good to go. Tracy Merrick says, how imperative is it to peel root veggies for pressure canning beef stew? I accidentally put a carrot in unpeeled and didn't realize until I finished. Tracy, you're fine. One carrot is not going to hurt a thing. A USDA is concerned about the peeling of root vegetables for the purpose of eliminating, since botulism bacteria live in the soil. That's one of the places that they live. They're everywhere, but in the soil as well, is to remove the peel and diminish the chance of botulism. If you have canned that beef stew properly and it's in the kill zone long enough, doesn't matter if any was in the jar at all. One carrot is not going to hurt a thing. RJ asks, can I shred my own cheese and dehydrate it? You cannot dehydrate cheese, or, I mean, it's your choice whether you try it or not, but it is not recommended by the USDA. I never did it, even before we got our freeze dryer. I would never do anything dairy in my dehydrator. Because we do have a freeze dryer, that's how I process our cheese. And Jenny Kemp says, I watched your video on making ghee, and I see that you do not process the jars to seal the lids. Okay, I do get that very same question often. The thing is, we need to understand what ghee is compared to what butter is. Butter has milk in it, milk solids. It is those milk solids that make it inappropriate to can. We do not can regular butter. That's on the USDA do not can list. But when we take that butter and boil it and boil it and boil it the way we do to make ghee, the milk solids go to the bottom and are crystallized, are caramelized on the bottom of the pan. And so what we have left is 100% fat. Botulism cannot grow in fat, for goodness sake. And so that is why I don't process it. I don't can ghee. What I do is an open kettle method for ghee, which means that I pour it into the jars, put the lid and the rings on, and it does seal. Well, of course it seals, because as it cools, it contracts. That was the word I was looking for. It contracts, and when it contracts, it pulls the lid down. That doesn't mean that it is canned, not in water. It is just open kettle canned, because you don't need to can it. It's 100% fat, and it's fine to go on the shelf just like that. Richard Hengst has a question about the Presto Digital. Thinks that it is too many cycles. Why do you have to put half of a jar of water in? Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to do that? I'm with you, Richard. I have a number of canners over there which I know are all safe, including the Presto. I hardly ever use the Presto because it's so fussy with all the different cycles that it has to go through. And I know that a lot of people have learned how to eliminate the warming cycle. People tried to tell me how to do it. I read instructions online how to do it. My canner will not do it for some reason. So whatever you need to do, just do it. The bottom line is just be sure that your processing time for your food matches the USDA guidelines, and you're fine. Melissa Hawk asks if we could get a pantry tour. And we do get this question often. And I just want to say thank you, Melissa. We appreciate you and a lot of other people who would like to see our food storage area, but we keep that private. My kitchen pantry right here, I've done a whole video on that one, so you can certainly see that one. This is Diane Jeffers. Can I vacuum pack dry beans packaged from the grocery store And will they last for long term that way? So keeping beans in the original packages and then vacuum sealing them inside a larger container, sure, you can do that. We buy beans in bulk, so we don't usually do that. We buy beans usually 25 pounds at a time, and so we pour them into other containers. But if you want to keep them in the original, that's fine. The one thing that might work against you there is if there are bug eggs of any kind inside that cellophane package and you vacuum seal everything around it, it is not going to take care of what might be in the bag. And for that reason, you may want to empty it out and put it in the jar without being enclosed in that cellophane and then vacuum seal it. The other thing that you could do is, if you're really wanting to keep it in the bag, put the bag in the freezer for 3 or 4 days, take it out for 3 or 4 days, let anything hatch that's going to hatch and put it back in your freezer. To me, that is something that I don't do. I know a lot of people do it, but Jessica Lamb says that she has watched several videos, including ours on chicken soup and black bean soup. And what she's noticed is that I didn't follow the recommended USDA times because and bless her heart, she went to the USDA canning soups page and looked at the processing time, which is 60 and 75 minutes for pints and quarts respectively. And she said, so now I'm confused. A lot of people do 75-90 instead of 60-75, which is right. Well, if you do it exactly the way the USDA would like for you to do, which is to cook the meat all the way through before you add it to your soup, then probably the 60 to 75 is just fine. I get nervous whenever meats are involved, and so I usually do, standard for me is 75-90 minutes. I found I don't know exactly what to politely call it, with the USDA recommended time for meat sauce, Italian meat sauce with meat in it. Their times for 60 and 75 minutes were not safe. I tested it with my gadget, and so my recommendation now is for more viscous things to be canned 75-90 minutes. Soups have a lot of liquid. They should be half solid and half liquid. Sometimes I put more solids in mine, and so that's another reason I go 75-90 instead of 60-75. So you can make the choice, but the USDA recommended for half solids and then the rest liquid is 60-75. Patricia Webb says, I was thinking about recanning corn and peas. Do you think this is a bad idea? Recanning from big cans, I would not do that. Things would be way too mushy because you would have to pressure can them again. Sarah's vacuum sealer does not automatically shut off. It just goes and goes and goes until she shuts it off. And so she would like to know what I recommend. Jim and I really stay away from a recommendation. I can tell you what we use, and we're very pleased with it. We have a Weston, Weston, and it was the model that is about $200, and it is listed on our gadget list on the website. Terry Ballard asked, must we use only salted butter to make ghee? Heck no. I use salted, I use unsalted, sometimes I use both in the same batch. Can zucchini and yellow squash be pressure canned? Yes. They will be mushy as all get out because they're a soft squash. Better to either dehydrate those or to freeze dry those. Ms. Shadowrunner says, frozen black-eyed peas, can these be turned into dehydrated fast beans? Yes. And in terms of how long the dehydrating time would be, I can never answer that question because dehydrators are so different. So the answer is you dehydrate them until they're dry. Joanna the singer wants to know how I keep up my busy schedule. And boy, does she go into detail about what a busy person does, and she is right on the money. And so she says, you know, and she doesn't have a gym, so she's single. She says, so how do I do this? And you know what? There's no easy answer for that. We all have to just work out our own schedules. And I have to fit my stuff into little time chunks. And one of the things that I do is think about time in chunks. I know how much prep time it takes to do beef stew. There's a lot of slicing and dicing. And so sometimes I'll do that the night before. And then I know that it takes about 3 hours to do a full batch. And so I have to wait until I know that I'm going to have a 3-hour time chunk. So chunking time might help just a little bit there. Jerry Van Meter asks, what are my thoughts on water glassing eggs? You know, Jerry, I have really looked into this long and hard. And I honestly cannot find any what I consider to be reliable research on whether or not that is a safe practice. A lot of people do it, a lot of people swear by it, the USDA is silent on it, and I have a freeze dryer. So that's how I do eggs. So I'm no help at all on water glassing eggs, I'm sorry. Is there a way to safely can ham that's already been processed? The answer to this is because ham is cured, the USDA says stay away from canning any cured meat, bacon, ham, cured sausage, ham hocks, anything like that, stay away from. Lean H says, have you used Pomona pectin? No, I rarely use pectin. I use lemon juice instead. But I hear that Pomona is just wonderful, but I don't have any experience with it. Timothy Williams asks a really good question. He says, is there a safe way to store water which has been through reverse osmosis? This was new to me, so I went down a rabbit hole on this one and learned a whole lot about reverse osmosis. And the answer is, from my perspective, and I read some research from National Institutes of Health on this, and because bacterial biofilm, it's called, which is that slick stuff that's full of bacteria that sometimes forms on water, forms so quickly on reverse osmosis water. The answer is to pre-treat your water if you're going to be storing it. So instead of waiting until afterward, because your water has been through reverse osmosis, treat it when you put it in. Follow the directions with either the pool shock that we have given or with Clorox before you close the lid on the bucket to store it, and that should take care of it. Okay, Norma Martinez is very nervous about pressure canning, and she is not alone. There are many of you out there who are in that very same boat. And she has a question after watching our pulled pork video, wanting to know if we could change it instead to using Mexican adobo sauce, and you bet you can. Ringwin Garcia wants to know if I have any experience with Harvest Guard lids, and I do not. Harvest Guard and Tattler are just about the same thing. They used to be one family, but there was a split, and now there are two factions of the same family doing almost the same lid. So anything I say about Tattler would be about the same with Harvest Guard, at least last time I checked, unless they have diverged a whole lot more. Devon Rainey says, is there a source out there that gives canning instructions for single ingredient canning? Oh, Devon, I'm so glad that you asked this question, because the answer to it is absolutely there is. It is the USDA guide, canning guidelines. They will tell you how to do anything single. It is the blue books that have all of the interesting multi-ingredient recipes for canning, and Bernardin also does multi-ingredients for canning. But the USDA, although they do some multi-ingredients, they'll tell you how to do potatoes, how to do green beans, how to do corn, how to do whatever. And so just plug into Google USDA canning and then whatever the food is that you want to do. Bubble Tea Kristen says, I saw a few videos online about putting fruit and a sugar solution into jars and just leaving it. Any idea of this technique, and does it work? Yikes. If I'm understanding you right, is this fermenting fruit? Unless there is a tested recipe on that, I would stay away from somebody's idea of how to shortcut that.
That's what it sounds like to me, too, is fermenting.
Yeah. Elaine Dameron wants to know what is my recommendation on waxing cheese, red waxing cheese to add to food storage. Elaine, I have never done that before. I have a freeze dryer and that's how I preserve my cheese. So it may be okay. I haven't read that much about it. I will take that up a little bit and see if I can find some good information and come back at a later time. All right, that's going to conclude this video. So we're on page 19 of 27 and we can wrap this up with another video. So thank you for being tuned in to part 2 and we'll see you soon with part 3.